wisdom through your infinite resources, from across the fields, across the globe, to really get an in-depth understanding. So welcoming each one of you, of the panelists that are already here. It's my privilege to welcome each one of you to this engaging conversation that we have ahead of you as the last conversation for the Women Economic Forum in its digital edition 2021. And I would like to offer my deep gratitude to each one of you for being here from wherever you are and bringing in your wisdom. We are, like I said, we are unpackaging STEM education without barriers, a collaborative, experiential learning. And I think that is really the way to the future, and the future is now. So it's, without further ado, I think it's time to really take a deep dive and unpackage all of the potentiality of an education without barriers. Dr. Sridhar Jagannathan has been generous enough to be our moderator for this wonderful conversation. And I'll take an opportunity to introduce our panelists as well. Dr. Sridhar from the San Francisco area is the founder and CEO of YoGeo. So fantastic, and looking forward to know more about your initiative, your organization. Welcoming Dr. Soumya R. Rao. She's the Senior Research Scientist at the Boston University School of Public Health. What a privilege to have you with us, Dr. Soumya. Welcoming Azra Ismail. She's a PhD candidate for Georgia Tech and also the founder of MakerGhat. Welcoming and representing the Latin American perspective, the Ecuadorian perspective, which we heard a little bit of earlier in the day as well through Her Excellency ex-President. I welcome Melissa Nebot. She's the business manager of her initiative called Girls in Tech. And I will now be checking if we are already joined by, okay, so when Nasreen joins us, I will introduce her. But in the honor of time, I'd like to pass on the dais to Dr. Sridhar, to forge this conversation ahead and enlighten us with all that it's going to unravel. Over to you, Dr. Sridhar.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mansi. Thank you for the very generous introduction. And as you had indicated, this is a very important conversation and is a very critical point in the evolution of mankind. And it is, we are in a state of affairs that I would argue cannot be overemphasized in terms of its urgency. There have been structural connotations to the development of girls and women historically over the last 2000 plus years. And we have seen that, and the attempts have been made to remedy this through law, through social practice, etc. But nowhere is it more acute than where we are right now, where there is a systemic problem in the nurturing of girls and women towards education in STEM fields. And the question is why? The reason is STEM is the basis by which we are encoding society now. We are encoding the practices in various ways in artifacts of the way we live through artificial intelligence that is embedded in the ways society operates. As simple as cars being automated, as simple as healthcare. In so many ways, we are now encoding what is it that future generations will learn, how is it that they'll live and practice in society. Now, the fact that we have inadequate numbers of women in these professions is extremely tragic because their voices are not being heard. Their feelings are not being encoded. As a consequence, society is developing in a male-dominated way, and this is not good. And I think there are clear indications that we have approached matters in a way that the feminine side of humanity is not being represented, now causes deeper issues in society. So I take this opportunity with this distinguished panel along with me to encourage people to be more participative in ensuring that girls and women are fully represented in all aspects of our society, which will then provide holistic and more meaningful ways of development. And the time is now, and it's urgent. So with that, let me call upon, let me tell you how we are going to organize this panel. There are 4 buckets, if you will. We're going to discuss STEM issues in schools, STEM issues in colleges, STEM issues in jobs. And here we're going to look at the context of each of these and unearth the problems underlying the lack of participation. And then as the last bucket, we're going to reserve for solutions. This panel intends that we have solutions for people to actively take part in a role to make sure that more girls and more women participate in this journey. So with that, we are going to get started. I would like to check whether we have all the participants. I understand Nasreen is waiting. If Mansi, if you could let her in, that would be great.
I have emailed her too also.
Okay. So the last session, we're going to have solutions. And the way we're going to lead this off is I'm going to have each one of our panelists take one segment of this discussion. We will start with schools once Nasreen joins, and then we'll have STEM in colleges discussed by Azra, and then STEM in jobs discussed by Melissa. And then Soumya will bring it all home in terms of solutions that the panel has discussed. I must tell you, the panel has been deeply involved in this topic for quite some time now. So has been preparing and is now ready to offer their perspectives, their professional views, as well as solutions. So I'll wait a minute because Nasreen is the one who starts us off.
If we don't see Nasreen soon. Okay, I see she's having trouble logging in. Okay, please give me a second.
No worries. While we do that, while Nasreen comes on, maybe each one of you can take a minute. Introduce yourself. I'm Sri Jagannathan. I'm an entrepreneur and technologist in the Bay Area. My company, YoGeo, is focused on giving identity to space, just like we have identity for people in Facebook, Google, etc. YoGeo intends to bring identity and actionability to any space dimension and objects occupying that space. Soumya? You're muted. Yeah.
I'm Soumya Rao. I'm a statistician. I have a PhD in biostatistics. I'm a senior research scientist in the Department of Global Health at Boston University, and I do consulting with other organizations. My journey has been through cancer epidemiology, doing research in cancer epidemiology, and I've moved on into disparities in healthcare access and healthcare treatment, disparities due to gender, race, ethnicity, and disability status, which is of very much of interest right now. And apropos to our discussion, I've also collaborated on a study looking at disparity, gender disparity in salaries for faculty in academic institutions. And for the last few years, I've been looking into modifiable factors to reduce maternal and neonatal deaths, mostly in Nagpur, India.
Melissa, if you could go next.
Oh, hi, first of all, thanks for the invitation. So happy to be here sharing this panel with these amazing professionals. My English is not that good, so I'll do my best. I am Melissa Nebot. I'm from Ecuador, from Latin America. I study business administration. I have a master in digital business. I am part of the board and the business manager of Girls in Tech Ecuador, an organization that was created in Silicon Valley 1 decade ago. It is in every continent teaching girls and women technology. I'm also consultant in business and strategic partnerships for startups and companies. I'm the member of EPICO, the innovation public company in Guayaquil, Ecuador.
Wonderful. Azra?
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here, part of this wonderful panel of speakers. I'm a PhD candidate in human-centered computing at Georgia Tech, where I study the design of tech for underserved settings in the global south. So most of my work there is based in India. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Make a Cart. We're a nonprofit educational organization based in Mumbai in India, where we build maker spaces and provide STEM education to youth who come from underserved backgrounds. So currently we're working in several states, including Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Telangana. So very happy to be here.
Thank you, Asra. Nasreen, if you could introduce yourself and then tell us about STEM schools.
Thank you so much, sir. I could hear your voice for the last few minutes, but I could not join. But I think now you can see me. Thank you, sir. I'm Nasreen from Bangladesh. I'm the Executive Director of NGO ECS, Education and Cultural Society. My affiliation with STEM is I'm one of the Echidna Global Scholar of Brookings Institution, where I did the research on barriers to STEM education for rural girl, a missing link to innovation for a better Bangladesh, and also had worked with the World Bank as consultant for Education Global Perspective in South Asia. That is also on STEM in school, college, and tertiary level, and in job market transition. Thank you.
Wonderful. Nasreen, let's just start now. Sure. You're leading us off on STEM issues in schools. Please continue.
Yeah. STEM education is multifaceted, cross-disciplinary approach. The foundation of STEM begins from early childhood and is related to everyday life and continues with education, livelihood, career, and civilization. The critical barriers of STEM actually start from the very early stage. It exists in all under-resourced, underprivileged, low or no tech society, but the most drastic effect actually fall on girls' participation in STEM. So there are multiple barriers that causes female disadvantage in STEM, like individual, institutional, societal, cultural, family, even policy levels barrier, and they interact in complex ways in adolescent age of girls. So in my research with Brookings Institution, stakeholders identified barriers to school girls STEM education with 6 thematic buckets, that is safety, poverty, quality of education and teachers, early marriage and motherhood, and social norms. So these all barriers are reasons for STEM gap. Actually, this gap is worldwide. Still, American Association of University Women says that although by certain measures progress has been made over the last 30 years in narrowing this gap, in science, girls and women continue to be underrepresented and marginalized in fields such as physics, engineering, and technology. So actually all these barriers are interlinked and cross each other in girls' progress. So I wish to continue my discussion with 3 barriers and with some recommendations, that is institutional, societal, and policy barriers for girls. So if we see about the institutional barriers, I can say school environment is even specifically masculine. The math, physics, technology subjects are dominating by male teachers, whereas female represent as literature, language, and social studies. So the cycle dropout rate for secondary education has decreased from over 61% in 2008 to below 38% in 2017 in Bangladesh. It is a good sign, but the dropout rate for girls has been higher than for boys over the years. So research shows that the high cost of STEM education, private tuition fees, poor institutional environment, violence, a lack of role model, limited control over their choice for higher studies, and future are the challenges for these school girls. So for solutions of institutional level, I can add some point that an intellectual, intelligent blending of gender-sensitive STEM-based real learning with all necessary transferable soft skills will provide us a globally acceptable generation soon. So internet access should be completely free and at any cost, and should provide all girls with digital tools. So prioritizing girls in STEM programs are required. So standard remuneration, proper facilities, and future security will attract more youth to accept teaching as a profession. Here we can say that even if required, the teacher's salary should be highest to get brilliant students of the nation as a teacher. Teacher standard should be also elevated to match global standard. So classroom should be stress-free, interesting, and technologically up-to-date. The typical boring and stressful syllabus and culture of memorization and panic-provoking examination system are unhealthy in the global context and bring drastic results. Moreover, all sorts of administrative and bureaucratic practices also should be decentralized. So evaluation should be based on students' need and performance of total effort, frequent class tests, projects, attending competitions and programs, rather than publishing publicly after a single intimidating hall examination. So after this institutional barrier, then if I say something about societal level barriers, then malnutrition in childhood and pregnancy has many adverse consequences for girl survival and long-term well-being. In Bangladesh, about 5.5 million children under 5 years, that is 36%, are suffering from chronic malnutrition and 14% are acutely malnourished. 40.2% of children and adolescents aged 5 to 19 years girls living with underweight. So Bangladesh has the 4th highest rate of child marriage in the world. 19.8% of girls get married before age 15 and 60% before the age of 18. So these factors all directly affect the participation and progress of schoolgirls in STEM studies. So for societal level barriers recommendation, besides providing educational support, countries like Bangladesh need to continue its fight against all social norms, unconscious bias, stereotype attitudes, thoughts, and all sorts of violence. A total collaboration of government, NGO, foundations, private sectors, local community, and civil society is a must to achieve the goal. So finally, for the policy level challenges, a corrupt education system underlies many of the challenges at the school level. Teachers are overburdened with teaching multiple subjects and lack adequate resources. So what government should give emphasis for each and every school? On average, South Asian countries spend less on education as a % of GDP than other regions, but there is a great heterogeneity across the region. Compared to other countries in the region, Bhutan devotes comparatively more public funds to education, followed by Nepal and Maldives. At the other end of the spectrum, Bangladesh spends the least on education. Thus, Bangladesh government has to give extra effort on education to introduce and promote STEM education. So even the facilities of urban and privileged schools and rural schools are more. So huge gap between developed and underdeveloped countries is a threat also. So according to UNESCO report, only 35% of STEM students in higher education globally are women. And differences are observed within STEM disciplines. For example, only 3% of female students in higher education choose information and communication technologies, ICT studies. So this gender disparity is alarming too. So and let me say some best practices as well, that Bangladesh secured the 47th position among 144 countries in 2017 as per the Global Gender Gap Report. Digital Bangladesh on the occasion of International Girls in ICT Day in 2021, Aspire to Innovation A2I, Grameenphone and Plan International Bangladesh jointly organized the virtual event to explore the reality, gaps, and scope for girls and young women to be active in the ICT sector for achieving an inclusive digital Bangladesh. So Bangladeshi NGO noticing the lack of STEM education for girls in Bangladesh, my NGO ECS Education and Cultural Society had launched a flagship project to expand rural girls' access to STEM education opportunities from 2015. Through different projects with US Department of State, Brookings Institution, ECS established hundreds of science, environment, and STEM clubs in rural and urban Bangladeshi schools. and train 2,000 STEM teachers to create gender-sensitive classroom environment. So that institutional, then societal and policy level barriers, if I want to say, add some policy level recommendations that we need.
So
here.
Nasreen,
So yeah, sir.
Nasreen, let's pause here because you have unearthed a lot of the problems in Bangladesh in particular, but developing countries in general. So this is a very good broad view of issues that prevail in schools and the reasons why there is less participation of STEM. So, I know you have good solutions. Let's wait on for that in the last segment. Let me move on to Azra. Azra, tell us about the situation of STEM in colleges for girls.
Thank you, Sridhar. So I think Nazreen actually covered quite a lot of ground, even at the higher education level. So there is certainly a big gap in terms of the gender parity when it comes to opting for STEM degrees at the college level. I will say that there's an interesting kind of phenomena at that level where there isn't a clear kind of developing countries gap. Both developed and developing countries have faced issues with getting women into STEM, and in fact, in some developed countries, the challenge is actually more pronounced than in several developing countries. So, for instance, in India, almost half of the women, like around 47% of the STEM education degrees, is comprised of women, which is wonderful. But again, when you start to see the gender breakdown by the specific degrees, you have fewer women opting for degrees that are seen as masculine, like mechanical engineering or civil engineering, where women are required to go into the field or are required to work in maybe more like factory settings or working with tools. That's where you start to see the gender ratio drop. And similarly, interestingly, CS and IT in India, again, you have almost a 50% sort of a participation of women in the degree. But in the US, it's I believe it's like around 30% or lower in the US. So and in the US, there's also been an interesting phenomena over time where women participation in STEM and in CS and IT, because that's the field I'm most familiar with. The participation was almost 50% when the field first began to grow, because CS jobs were paid lower. And then when the CS jobs started to get paid more and more men began to enter the field, and the number of women in CS IT degrees began to drop. So there's this interesting phenomena also in terms of what is considered as work that's appropriate for women. It's also tied to the pay that's associated with these jobs. There's a whole historical analysis that several researchers have done on how kind of the drop in equity in over time instead of kind of improvement because of the socioeconomic situation in which these STEM jobs are gaining prominence. So I think, I mean, like immediately there's several kinds of pieces to it, right? So there's the social dimension, of course, in terms of the value we associate with STEM education and who STEM education is seen for, especially within fields, like whether it's biology or biomedical engineering. Many of those are seen as more women dominated. At the same time, you have more of like CSIT and more like mechanical engineering, where you start to see women representation drop. Then you also have like within these sort of buckets of like women and men, you again have disparities based on race or based on caste or based on other kinds of intersectional dimensions of a person's identity. So in the US, for instance, Black women are particularly underrepresented in many STEM fields. In India, again, like people from lower castes, are women from lower castes specifically are less represented in many of these different domains. So even though the US and India, they have like affirmative representation, in India, you now have quotas based on caste and based on gender, but then when you look at women from certain underrepresented communities, that particular bucket is not represented in itself. So you start to see even more like, as you dig deeper, you start to see more breakdowns based on the particular perspective of each individual. So you have the social dimension, you have institutional policies that have been created for trying to address the gender gap. But I think one of the biggest challenges is on the institutional level. Like, so what can universities be doing more, right, to improve women representation in their various degrees? And a part of the challenges is that if you look at the college boards, if you look at the leadership, it's typically dominated by men. It's starting to see a bit of shift over time, because institutions have started to realize that you're entering the 21st century, you really need to be thinking about gender parity in your various institutional leadership levels. So you're starting to see that, but I would say that India is particularly behind when it comes to representation of women leaders on their boards, in terms of funders, in terms of faculty, in terms of who is given chairs. And that also links, and this is kind of the last point so that I can wrap up and we have time for other pieces as well. But the other piece that that is also very closely linked to both college and job education is the kind of work that women are also expected to do in the home, right? So women are not just thinking about their degree or working on their exams or working to apply to different kinds of positions, but many times they're also engaged in helping with cooking or helping with work in the house, especially if they're not living on college campuses. Many women who are attending colleges close to home because of safety concerns or because of other kinds of social norms around women traveling to other places. So that then brings in a whole level of complexity, because the starting line for women and non-female students is very different, because the amount of work they need to do to get to that same point is different. So those are all some of the pieces of the puzzle. Another piece is that, like in India, for instance, many universities have curfew for women students and not for male students, which means that women are unable to use libraries or unable to use certain kinds of facilities after 6 p.m. And that immediately reduces their level of access to different kinds of resources on campus, immediately impacts the ability to build up their portfolios and then apply to jobs and kind of be competitive in their universities and the workplace. So those are some of the things that really need immediate addressing and are very easy starting points, I believe, but require institutional intent to make it happen.
All right. Did you have anything more, Ezra, to add at this point? We have a little bit more time in your segment. If not, we'll come back to you on the solution side.
I think for now, I think this is good. I can add more as we move around.
Wonderful. Okay, so clearly, as you can see, this is a funnel. The funnel starts at birth and discrimination starts. Parents discourage their children from, their daughters from attending certain types of classes with a variety of considerations that Nasreen indicated. But they are often malnourished. And as we get into college now, there is more systemic issues associated why they are not in the right STEM fields, and therefore there's less participation. And now we come to the third part of the funnel, which is the job front. From a fairly disadvantaged population of candidates, those candidates now enter the job front, and the situation for women in employment is not good. So Melissa, could you lead us off on that issue?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. As we have heard, it's obvious, right? If there's a gap in women studying STEM careers, it will be then translated in a gap in STEM in jobs, right? So why is it so important to close the gap and have more women in working in those fields? Just to give a little context, according to a recent collaborative study effort among 29 UN programs, they say half of the existing jobs will disappear by 2050. That's like, we're talking about like 60% of the children entering primary school today could eventually end up working in jobs that do not even exist today. That's because the fourth industrial revolution will need STEM skills, right? There are also several sources that anticipate that as much as 75% of jobs will be related to those fields. That's a UNESCO study. So it's almost no occupation that will be unaffected by technological change in the AI era. That's why in Girls in Tech, the organization that I work with, we say that technology is no longer an industry, technology is every industry. And that's why we need more women, more girls, more diversity, and more people contributing and studying these careers. So this is a generation that can expect to change jobs and profession multiple times across many new emerging sectors. And in doing so, they will need to continuously skill up and learn skills for the future of work and have STEM skills. There is also estimated that 3.5 million of jobs will be created by 2025. There will be STEM related, and those will need to be filled. And the question is if we are preparing kids or young people to have those skills and fill those jobs, right? So the problem with specifically the gender gap is that, as here has been said, women are not studied, not entering this career for a lot of reasons. In Latin America and Caribe, it's only 30% of women in the region that are studying these careers. And among the world, it's between 15% and no more than 25-30% of women working in STEM jobs around. I think we share that with every nation. These gender gaps are exceptionally high in some of the fastest growing and highest paid jobs of the future, like computer science and engineering. For example, in the United States, women represent just 50% of the workers that are working in computer and engineering occupation. So another problem is also the wage gap. According to a Pew Research Center, a typical STEM worker is earning 2/3 more than any other field. And a white man is earning 40% higher, or have a 40% higher salary than women in those fields. And it's the gap is more significant for a Black woman and a Hispanic woman. Other problem, it's also the women in leadership position, women in management level. There's a problem not only because we are discriminated, but also, for example, in Ecuador, there's a study made by Ipsos that showed that 6 of every 10 women thought that if they have a leadership position and earn more than their partners, they will have problems at home. So it is also a cultural problem, right? So there's a lot of reasons and factors perpetuating the gender gap in STEM jobs. I have identified 4 main problems. One, the first one is the gender stereotypes, right? STEM fields are often viewed as masculine, and even since we're kids, right? We enter a toy store and there's a lot of creative toys for boys and for girls, at least in our country, and it's pretty much the same in this time. We have a lot of dolls or kitchen toys, and there's no problem with that. It's okay if part of our life as a woman, but it's not the only thing we need to show girls, right? It's not just have to be a mother and working home. We have to teach girls since young, little age, like that they can be everything they want. The other problem is that these are perceived like male-dominant culture, and because fewer women study and work in STEM, these fields tend to be male-dominated, and things like we see it as not supportive or not attractive to women and minorities. I know girls in my country that haven't told their parents that they are studying engineering or STEM until the day of the graduation because they are afraid that their parents won't allow them to be in and studying that areas, right, their careers. Other of a problem is the lack of role models. We have talked about that. You can be what you can see. We have heard that, right? And having limited examples of female scientists and engineers made it much difficult for girls and women to imagine themselves as being successful in those areas. So there's a lot of women, and there has been a lot of women doing amazing things in science and technology, but we haven't teach that girls and boys. So we don't see that role models, right? And the fourth problem is and I think maybe one of the most important is the work-life balance, the reconciliation in work and family, especially with maternity. STEM career are perceived as much more challenging to balance with your personal life, and studies show that women that live with children, that have children, have more barriers to continue their jobs and have successful careers in any profession, but especially in STEM that are perceived as more difficult careers. So I think that those are the main problems, and I think we're going to discuss the solutions, the possible solutions later.
Melissa, before we go to the solutions, you had articulated a good set of questions, I think, which would be useful to bring out now, and that will head us into the Soumya section on solutions. And clearly, this is the most visible. This is the top of the pyramid in terms of issues that are visible in society. Can you lead us off on the questions that you see?
In specifically in jobs or in general?
In jobs, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I think the big question that I have is how we articulate solutions that have a systemic approach or a moralistic approach so that we can see changes more quickly, because I think it's taking so long. We share this problem around the world, and there are a lot of wonderful initiatives, but I think we have in common that all these initiatives work separately, and we're doing a lot of effort, but it's not enough. So what will be those systemic approach or more holistic solutions?
So you talked about how to motivate women to work in STEM. How do we close the gender gap, etc. Right? These are very clearly job-related issues which are visible. All right. So let's move on now. We'll take a different tack. So we have seen that there are structural issues that mitigate against girls participating in STEM school subjects in school, young women participating in colleges in STEM fields, and finally, women in jobs that they are not, they do not hold the right positions. There are not enough of them. They are not in leadership, etc. Now, there are horizontal issues in each one of these things, and then there are issues which transcend all of these, and they are across school, colleges, and jobs. And Soumya is going to pick up on that theme of dimensions which go across. Some are maybe more narrowly, for instance, job discrimination might be in a job situation, but there are structural issues in society which are reducing the number of women in leadership positions in STEM. Soumya, could you lead us off on big issues that prevail and solutions that potentially all the panelists could contribute to?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Nazreen, Azra, and Melissa, for laying out the problems really well. And I'll try to summarize the problems. And towards the end, you can chime in if I've missed anything. So as we know, we talked about fear, social cultural norms, gender stereotypes, male cultures, probably lack of resources or limited resources, and work-life balance. And a lot of these are overlapping for school, college, and work, but there are certain things that are very specific to work. And as we have discussed previously, there is no one-size-fits-all type of solution. So these solutions will have to be adapted to the circumstances that an organization or a country faces, and they'll have to be creative, because on the face of it, the solutions sound very simple, but implementing them will not be easy, because while we try to create an equitable society and bring women into the workforce, into schools and colleges, we also have to make sure that boys and men don't get left behind and they lose opportunities. So we need to create a balance, and that's where the implementation becomes very difficult. So let's start with fear of the unknown. That's what creates fear, uncertainty of the future. And this I've seen not only among what we think rural families, but also well-educated families, as to, first of all, can our girls compete? The second thing is, if they can compete, and can they get married? If they get married, can they manage their family, work, and life? So should they really be going for jobs that are not safe? So how do we deal with that? We need to create and educate, create an awareness and educate these women, show them examples where women have done this, and also to convince them that our day-to-day life has been infiltrated by technology, and whether their daughters decide to work or not, which is the choice they should be given, they will still need to be exposed to technology to make sure their families happy, healthy, and safe, because everything is technologically managed these days. And as we go forward, that's how life is going to be. But if they opt to go work, because marriage is incidental, marriage is not the end goal in life. And sometimes circumstances can happen where both partners have to work together for the financial stability of the family. And so being in STEM will help them get lucrative jobs and financially contribute to the family, and also fulfilling jobs. It's not just about money, but you can be in careers where you can actually help to improve the health of your family and the community at large. Then comes the fear of the girl child. And children, as Nasreen pointed out, at a very young age, children don't know fear. They will be willing to do anything. And that's the time to instill that self-confidence in them. And you don't start by saying you can't do this, or you should not be doing that, women can't do this. At that stage is when we need to instill that self-confidence. And we all know that it only takes one person to say, I believe in you, for somebody's self-confidence to increase. And I've seen this with my mentees who, because of lack of family support, they were at points where they would want to drop out of school, or they did not think they could finish their tasks. But just my being there and saying, you know what, I know you have the potential, I know you can do it, has really helped them do it. I mean, they have risen to that expectation. And we need to set those challenges and expectations for girls. And we need to tell them that if boys can do it, girls can do it. And so then cultural norms, and fear and cultural norms go hand in hand. So we need to also start teaching STEM in a different way and make it more fun at a very young age, make it more fun, more exciting, and connect it with their day-to-day life. So we need to find examples for rural girls or rural children, examples in rural community where that they see day-to-day, and for urban children in the urban community. We cannot be just having random examples that you cannot relate to. And I will bring this point back again in another example. So then there is the gender stereotype, and we need to sensitize children from childhood that there is gender fluidity. I think Dr. Harbeen mentioned this in her opening remarks yesterday, that there is stereotype of what women do, what men do, and we need to make it that it's okay for men and women to do everything at home, cooking, cleaning, embroidery, knitting, whatever, to going into STEM. So they grow up to see each other as equal partners, to respect each other and support each other when they, in future, and learn to collaborate with each other. So men know how to work with women, women know how to work with men. So moving on from there, we then need to create role models, right? And COVID has actually created an opportunity. The whole world has been watching what's going on. And we have seen that women have contributed equally as men in the development of vaccines, treatments, taking care of patients as doctors, nurses, health aides, everywhere. So we need to identify these women and promote them in print media and otherwise. And this is where I have a couple of examples. There were movies made on women's accomplishments, and I'll mention two, which I think are very inspiring. One was in India called the Mission Mangal. This was based on the Mars mission, and the team of women scientists at the Indian Space Research Organization were the ones that actually went through the process of putting this orbiter to Mars. And they made this movie, and even though they took some kind of like a poetic license, to so to speak, they made the movie really fun, because I know that putting an orbiter into space is not a simple project, but every part of that was somehow related to your daily life, from cooking to using plastics to surfing on the net. And they connected it, which made it so exciting and inspiring for girls or boys, anyone, to think of this field as so exciting, space research being such an exciting field to go into. And the other movie was called Hidden Figures. This is from Hollywood. And this was about Black women at the height of sexism and racism in the US, working as manual computers in at NASA. And these 3 women were shown in this movie as being very, very important for the space program's progress at NASA and the struggles they went through to get there. So these are inspiring stories for women to watch, and we need to make more of these about these accomplishments. And it's possible to do it now. The other thing is the stereotype, not only of gender, but the stereotype of who is a scientist, right? A white lab coat person with hair standing up, with thick glasses that they can't even see through. And that is what people think about when they think of scientists, and that image has to be changed by promoting these women who are not only beautiful, but they're fun to be around and they're intelligent. And it's okay. These are not mutually exclusive qualities. It's okay to do all of these. And if women see more of these kinds, they will do it, because everybody wants to be popular, men, women. And going into STEM for boys or for girls is tough, because they don't want to be popular. They want to be seen as fun people to hang around with. And with lucrative jobs and the way STEM has progressed, I think it has become an exciting field to attract people. So moving on from here, the next thing that we talked about is hiring more female faculty, more female teachers. So you see more of them, more in leadership roles, more on policy boards. But one thing I would like to say is that we also need to train them, because hiring them is not enough. We need to train them to motivate, encourage, and promote women. Because a lot of women who have made it to the positions they have made it to have had great male mentors who have supported them through the process. And we need to teach these women to do the same for other women. So the women coming after us have a slightly easier time getting there and not have to struggle through it, because we hire women into these positions, but they come into a culture created by men. So it's a male-dominated culture, and we need to make sure that these women don't get absorbed into that culture, but can bring in their perspective, their opinions, their experiences to bear on the policies that are made, because currently most policies affecting women are made by men at the table. There's no woman at that table, and every part of your life. So we need to train these women. We need to give them great training. And here we need to give training to both men and women, because men also need to learn that they need to support, nurture, and get women into higher positions. We need to have women's societies, but we should also bring in men to learn from those societies. We have a women's in statistics group that has a conference. We bring men in there so they're exposed to what women are thinking, what do they need, what are their problems, what are their issues, and that will help them think through these things. Now this part might be more for schools and colleges. It's about how much money should be spent. And I think one of you talked about the GDP, percentage of GDP that should be spent on education for women, for everybody, but also for women. And we need to get more scholarships for women. We need to have financial incentives for families that might not be able to afford to send all their children to school. We need to give them incentives. We need to give incentives to the children, so the children have an incentive to stay in school. So at the end of it, they get either internship, a job, they get some money, whatever helps them. And for institutions to get more students in, more girls in, have some kind of quota system. You admit one boy, you admit one girl. Something like you admit 3 girls if there's too much of a disparity. But again, as I mentioned, we need to make it equitable. So while we give advantages to women, we cannot make it disadvantageous for boys. So what do? We need to increase the number of schools. Safety is an issue. So build more schools closer to home, so children don't have to travel very far. We need to have more seats in schools and colleges. We need to create more opportunities so both men and women can participate. Then I'm going to just move on to, and because the resources are limited, developing countries, if they don't have the resources, international organizations like the World Bank, IMF, can give them loans to help promote these things. So the one other thing that I would like to talk about is jobs. And what do? We have talked about having more inclusive environments. I think Azra was talking about co-sharing of spaces. And I will start first by hiring practices and salary negotiations, because there is no transparency in hiring practices and salary negotiations. So for anybody to realize that there is a disparity, we need transparency. And salary negotiations, especially in the US, there is no transparency. Everybody's salary is a secret. And even if when they make it transparent, the range is so large for each position that disparities, you can have a huge disparity at the same level. And here I have an example of good leadership and creating parity. I heard from this statistician, a very well respected statistician. I have great respect for her. She was a chair of the biostatistics department, and she was hiring assistant professors, and she had these two candidates, one male, one female. And as we have read everywhere, men are better negotiators of salary than women. But she found that the male candidate had asked for more salary than the female. So what she did was she offered the same higher salary to both male and female candidate. And that's one way. And this is because of her experience and her exposure. And this is what we need to train hiring managers to do. And
Okay,
then,
Samia.
yeah, just one more point I would like to make, and then I'll open it up to the others, is strong family leave policies, both maternity and paternity, having daycare sites on campus, and allowing flexible times so women and men both can attend to their families. And I'll bring in one more point later on in the discussion. Thank you. Thank you for
So
this.
we are running a bit tight on time. So what I would like to do, obviously we have exposed the problems that prevail. We have identified, Samia has brought out in a collaborative way all the solutions that are also available to fix these problems. But I want to focus a little bit on, is it all talk or is there action? And certainly governments need to do more, companies need to do more, colleges can do better, etc. But I also want to highlight that our panel is active on the ground. So I'm going to ask our panelists to take a minute or so each, a minute or two, to talk about what they're doing on the ground. Nasrin, can you tell us what you're doing in Bangladesh with ECS, which is actually implementing some of the solutions that we just talked about?
Sure, sir. Yes, through ECS from 2010, we had started working for the establishing science clubs and also organizing science fair in rural schools where they had no opportunities. Afterwards, in 2015, officially with the support of the State Department, we had started our promotion. But at first, the promotion of STEM education was limited in urban schools, and gradually we had spread it in all over Bangladesh. And now, in this year, as we are celebrating the 50 years independence anniversary with the USA as well, so that in 2022 we had started the 2-year project, and we are going to cover all 8 divisions of Bangladesh, and already we had covered 5 divisions, so where we are going to do the seminars for teachers, and also for the 10,000 female students will get the opportunity under this project. So in the same way, we made a collaboration, excellent collaboration with Agastya International Foundation of India, so where we are getting the STEM approach and also the learning procedure, and also the way they are making the models and STEM models. So our teachers and students are getting the direct support as well as the training with this. So this type of collaboration we are going to make, and with the support of Brookings Institution, we had organized a STEM Olympiad, STEM seminar, symposium for the students, and we were amazed to see the excellent projects like holography and other projects, not only the models. So now they are thinking about the realistic real life projects, the rural girls that they are advanced, and nowadays we are giving much emphasis only for the women and girls STEM projects through
Beautiful. Azra, can you tell us the remarkable things you're doing with MakerGuard on getting girls involved in hands-on STEM?
Yeah, for sure. So, our intervention kind of comes in at different aspects of the program. So, a program, the way it works is that we have training for the instructors with whom we are working. in terms of how they should deliver the curriculum. Then we have actual curriculum design, and then we have monitoring and evaluation. So in each of these processes, you have a very explicit focus on thinking about gender. So in terms of the training that we provide, the spaces where we are doing the STEM programs, we kind of explain how can you build an equitable culture in the classroom. How do you kind of make the women and girls more comfortable with the kind of content? What are the kinds of examples that you can use? What are the ways that you should be forming groups? What are the ways in which you should be addressing everyone in the classroom? So, creating that space that is safe and equitable, that's a big part of what we do. Then the curriculum itself that we deliver. So our focus is on hands-on making. So we bring in different kinds of concepts to students by making them work with their hands and using materials and tools that are available to them. So the way we select the tools and the content to deliver is that they're selected to not be very intimidating, and to not be necessarily things that have a very masculine focus. So for instance, if we have like a module on mechanics and working with wood, we get students to build like a birdhouse, which has like an aspect of like nurturing and kind of thinking about the environment. If we have something around like paper electronics, like working with paper and electronics to build different kinds of circuits, and like an example is like building like this beautiful like flower that opens and closes based on like where you press on the circuit, which is something that's attractive and interesting to both to all genders. So those are the kinds of pieces that we think about. And then finally, in the monitoring and evaluation, we have an explicit focus on recording performance of students across gender. So how is gender influencing attendance? How is it influencing the learning outcomes? And in terms of also like our instructors. So we also evaluate the instructors' observations. Are they ensuring that the classroom is safe and equitable? So those are all pieces that we think about very actively in our programs.
Beautiful. So people can come to MakerGot and gain your expertise and guidance on implementing it in their environments. Melissa, do you have a minute to talk about how you're influencing in Latin America the focus of STEM for jobs or girls in tech?
Yeah, with Girls in Tech, as I mentioned, Girls in Tech is an organization that was born in the United States in Silicon Valley, but we adapt the programs to our reality in Ecuador. So we are approaching programs to low-income communities, teaching digital marketing, digital business, teaching girls and women how to code. We have short programs and also very complete programs that pretends to teach them tools that they can apply to actually enter the job market in those areas, right? So there's girls and women that maybe they are single mothers and doesn't have access or any more access to universities or schools, and we are teaching them in these shorter programs these tools that we think they will use to later to work in those areas, right? We also make a lot of events, hackathons for girls to work in solutions, and I think that's important just to tell them why STEM, why they need to know technology, how can they contribute, right? How what's the impact they can make, and also have events with role models, Latin American role models, young role models. And we started to invite also men and boys, because one of the things we think is like we have to invite men, we have to get more men involved. You need to be your allies too, because we don't, we're not going to change anything by ourselves, right? We need the whole society.
Thank you, Melissa. We're going to wind down in 2 minutes, so I'm just going to close this session with a few final remarks. I want to thank all of you. You have put a lot of effort into a wonderful presentation of the underlying issues of STEM and the solutions that can prevail. And you yourselves each one of you is very active in promoting STEM for girls and women. So that's wonderful. I want to highlight the fact that this is an urgent problem and activism is absolutely needed. I would strongly encourage girls and women and men certainly who are listening to take this very seriously. And in fact, I encourage the Women Economic Forum to take this as maybe the single most important thing to do. There are many other problems, but if this is not solved, many of these other problems are going to actually increase. So I would urge the Women Economic Forum to take this as a key point of activism for girls and women throughout. there are excellent examples already. Malala Yousafzai from Pakistan has demonstrated that girls in education is critical, and society degrades if we do not allow women to participate holistically. We have the example of Greta Thunberg, who at the age of 15 started protests outside her school saying that we need to look at climate. And it is that voice of that young girl which has resonated all the way to the UN on forcing particularly old male leaders to look at our world differently. Finally, we have the case of Timnit Gebru, who in a very high position in STEM in Google, unfortunately found that she could not sustain her position in terms of advocating for unbiased implementation in AI, which is now becoming more and more intrinsic to the way we live. So I would strongly urge the audience as well as the Women Economic Forum to formulate methods by which this issue can be brought to the fore. People can be more active and change can come about quickly and equitably. So thank you all for participation. Mansi, let me turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Sri. Thank you for that absolutely, in-gripping conversation and really opening up our minds. And, you really took us through the entire life cycle of STEM education and, through this very, very comprehensive narrative of its life cycle as well. So I'd like to offer my deep gratitude to each one of you for your time. And like we know also that, due to the paucity of time, we would have loved to hear more from you. We'll take that suggestion on of forming a task force as an outcome of this, very meaningful conversation. And like you said, Sri, that this is a need which is more urgent than ever before, and more so than any other matter that, we have at our hands. This one definitely takes priority over anything else we're dealing with at the moment. So thank you so much to each one of you, for creating the body of work that you do, for sharing your wisdom with us today as well, and opening up our minds. And as a gesture of our gratitude, we'd like to offer you awards in this moment as we close our memorable day, a day full of learning, full of wisdom. We'd like to acknowledge Dr. Sridhar Jagannathan as a leader of the decade in education. Please acknowledge this title on behalf of the All Ladies League at the Women Economic Forum 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, please make some noise, put your hands together for the incredible body of work that Sri bestows upon the world. Inviting Dr. Soumya R. Rao as we acknowledge you as a woman of the decade in education as well, acknowledging you with this honor at the Women Economic Forum 2021. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulating also Qazi Nasreen Siddiqa from Bangladesh for the exceptional work she does, and acknowledging her as an exceptional woman of excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for this incredible lady from Bangladesh. Inviting Azra Ismail, the founder of Maker Ghat, and acknowledging you as well as an exceptional woman of excellence. Congratulations. We know you have a bright future and a long way ahead, but we're with you every step of the way. And thank you so much for already doing, already creating such a substantial contribution in this space. Thank you. Last but not the least, acknowledging our Ecuadorian Latin American perspective through the eyes, through the loving hands of Melissa Nebot, the business manager of Girls in Tech, all the way from Ecuador. It's our privilege to acknowledge you as an exceptional woman of excellence at the Women Economic Forum 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for this illustrious panel that have absolutely enriched us through this comprehensive, enriching journey. Deep gratitude to each one of you for your time and for the wisdom that you have bestowed upon us. thank you very, very much. And we hope to see you somewhere, somehow, sooner than later. Take care, everyone. Namaste from, on behalf of the Women Economic Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.